Caption close Sao Paulo, AP, something in Brazil has snapped. After one of the deepest recessions in its modern history, the largest corruption scandal in Latin America, and more than a year under what may be the most unpopular president in the world, Brazilians are desperate for something different, so desperate that some are calling for the return of a military dictatorship. But a handful of new organizations are trying to channel that anger into reinvigorating the country's democracy by luring fresh faces into a political establishment widely seen as closed off and unrepresentative. The idea was simple: how to turn indignation into political action, said José Frederico Lira Neto, a co-founder of Acredito, one of the new nonpartisan movements. Acredito and another group called Agora hope to each field about 30 candidates in next year's elections who have never held office before. They're asking people across the country to help create their platforms by suggesting solutions to Brazil's thorniest issues: inequality, crime, failing schools, and an aging population with a faltering social security system. Their efforts focus on state and federal legislatures. A third organization, Renova BR, is offering training and living expenses to about 150 newcomers, who are being selected from thousands of applicants who want to run for office. It says they must commit to close ties with constituents by, for instance, publicly justifying every vote they cast. The movements are taking aim at a system they say has ceased to represent the Brazilian people. Even though President Michel Temer's popularity ratings have dipped close to the margin of error above zero, his allies in Congress have twice been able to block efforts to have him tried on corruption charges sought by federal prosecutors. Many lawmakers are wary of such trials because many of them, too, have been implicated in corruption scandals. Part of the disconnect between politicians and their constituents stems from the way Brazilian parties now choose or exclude candidates. Party leaders keep tight control over who can run, as well as the funds they need to campaign, making it nearly impossible for newcomers who challenge the status quo. Existing politicians often designate a successor, many times a child or at least a protege, as was the case when former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva championed Dilma Rousseff. The Byzantine party system and rampant corruption have also turned off many younger Brazilians, leaving the country still largely in the hands of the generation that took power when Brazil returned to democracy in the 1980s. A new system of public campaign financing favors the big, traditional parties while penalizing smaller ones and newcomers. And independents are banned. That means these new groups will have to negotiate with existing minor parties to put their neophyte candidates on the ballot, and talks have already begun. The growing fury at traditional politicians has helped lawmaker Jair Bolsonaro, who lauds the country's 1964 to 1985 military regime and has been ordered by courts to pay fines for racist, homophobic, and sexist comments. He has risen to second place in preference polls ahead of next year's presidential election.